We hebben nog 6 minuten voordat de officiële start zal gaan beginnen. De wedstrijd zal gaan over een totale lengte van 307 kilometer en 75 meters. Oftewel 71 ronden over het circuit, wat een lengte heeft van 4,3 kilometers. Sinds 1990 wordt de wedstrijd gehouden hier op Interlagos. Daarvoor was het Brazilië, het circuit van Caraguaguá, moeilijke namen. Dat heb je wel vaker in die zuidelijke landen. Daar zit hij, Nigel Mansell. De man die dus pole position achter zijn naam wist te zetten. Het is de 20ste maal dat hij dat doet in zijn carrière. En daarmee schaart hij zich naast Alain Prost. De meest succesvolle man met pole position is natuurlijk nog steeds Ayrton Senna. Roger Clark 33, Van Joe 28, Lauda 24 samen met Piquet ook 24 en dan Prost 20. En nu ook dus Nigel Mansell in dat rijtje. Dit is het onboardshot van de wagen van Riccardo Patrese, die daardoor de monteurs nog even succes gewenst wordt. En het wordt voor de beide Williams-coureurs natuurlijk toch weer belangrijk. Wat gaan we doen? Nemen we die zogenaamde computerstart of niet? Misschien weten we het niet, ze hebben een keuze. Ze kunnen normaal tussen haakjes starten. Het zijn toch semi-automatische wagens. Maar ze kunnen ook de computer het werk laten doen tot en met de 4e versnelling. Bij de 5e moeten ze zelf in gaan grijpen. Dan wordt de wagen weggestuurd met 12% wielspin. En naar nu blijkt heeft Riccardo Patrese dat gedaan in de eerste Grand Prix van het seizoen die gehouden werd op het circuit van Kialami in Zuid-Afrika. Hier wordt de body op de wagen gezet van Ayrton Senna. Je ziet dat cameraatje zit gewoon aan die body vast. Senna die heel veel uit de nieuwe McLaren MP47 gehaald heeft. Ze waren vrijdag, zowel Senna als Berger, zeer ontevreden over de wagen. Met name het vermogen hadden ze wat over te klagen. En er wordt dan ook verwacht dat het wel eens een probleem kan gaan worden voor met name Michael Schumacher, Jean Alesi, Martin Brundle en Pierluigi Martini om aan de beide McLarens voorbij te komen. Dat klinkt misschien raar, maar in de warm-up die zo'n 4,5 uur geleden heeft plaatsgevonden, terwijl nog 3 minuten te gaan zijn, in de warm-up van hedenmiddag waren de McLarens niet te vinden bij de snelste 8 wagens. En dat zegt veel, want vaak in zo'n warm-up proberen ze die wagens uit op raceafstelling. Overzicht hier. De eerste startrij dus volledig Williams, de tweede startrij volledig McLaren. En eigenlijk is het toch wel knap dat ze met die nieuwe auto gewoon tweede en derde staan. Vorige wedstrijd op het circuit van Mexico waren het de beide Bennettons die daar stonden. Maar Michael Schumacher had daar toch wel kunnen zijn. Ondanks het feit dat hij een motor geploft had. Wat u hier ziet is de hartslag aan boord van Christian Fittipaldi. Die wordt gemeten. En zo ziet u, ze gaan steeds verder. Daarin kan je zien, het is dus nu 123. En als we dat vlak voor de start nog even terugkrijgen, dan zult u toch wel zien dat dat behoorlijk omhoog gaat. Er komt natuurlijk een enorme stoot adrenaline door het lichaam heen. Je weet dat je tussen de 4 en 7 seconden moet wachten alvorens je van start kan gaan. Als iedereen stilstaat, dan gaat het licht op rood. En tussen de 4 en 7 seconden wordt het groene licht aan ingeschakeld. En daarin is het natuurlijk uiterst belangrijk dat je je concentratie goed vasthoudt. We zitten 1 minuut voordat de opwarmronde gaat beginnen. De bandenverwarmers zijn eraf. De wagen van Senna wordt op de 4 wielen gezet. Die bandenverwarmers die de banden opwarmen tot ongeveer 75 à 80 graden Celsius. Het is een prachtige racenatie, Brazilië. Ze hebben in de totale carrière van het Formule 1 8 wereldtitels bij elkaar gehad. Engeland is op dit moment het beste land met 10 wereldtitels. Het circuit heet Carlos Pace, de beroemde Braziliaanse rijder die 1 keer een wedstrijd won. Dat was de Grand Prix van Brazilië in 1975. En in 1977 verongelukte Carlos Pace tijdens een...
Well, for the race, I at least get a new set of tires, and in this morning's warm-up, I was running on tires that's done 40 laps already. Jerry Boutsen, his best qualifying performance so far this year. And then we find Ivan Capelli, and we see Gerhard Berger with a problem getting away. And John, if he gets away last, he can't take up his original grid position.
Yes, that's right, Gerhard Berger in for a problem. I don't know, it looks to me like he has a clutch problem or he's lost the engine, one of the two. remember, an automatic gearbox in this car. He can't select the gear without pressing the clutch. So for Gerhard Berger, it looks very, very ominous indeed. If he does manage to get it running, he will have to start at the back of the grid. And this is really a pretty awful start for McLaren. Gerhard Berger with this new car.
Well, that's good news, I think. We've talked about that this morning for Michael Schumacher, because he needs to get into that first corner ahead of both McLarens.
He does indeed, because I think if he doesn't get past Ayrton Senna or Gerhard Berger, certainly now Ayrton Senna, he will find it very difficult to get past Ayrton Senna. Senna will do everything possible, everything that is fair, that is, to retain what I would assume would be third place at the end of the first lap. Michael Schumacher will have to really bide his time a little bit. And look, Gerhard Berger still on the grid now. I think this car is going to have to be pushed away, because unless they can get it started within the next 15 or 20 seconds, that car is going to be in the way for the start of the race. Look, they're fiddling at the back of the steering wheel at the ignition wires. Oh, there's the gear change. Well, the gear change, you see, the levers for the gear change are also behind the steering wheel. Berger now being pulled off. He will go into the pit lane, the entry lane, into the pits. And that really looks like it's an electrical problem.
Well, I think this car's riding now, John.
Well, or else there's very strong mechanics pushing it behind, but I think
he'll start from the pit lane, we assume, unless he gets into his pit. If we carry on with the grid positions, Capelli and Modena, 6th row, 7th row, Andrea De Cesaris and Michele Alboreto, 8th row, Comas and JJ Leto, 9th row, Olivier Crouillard and Bertrand Gachot, 10th row, Gabriele Tarquini and Christian Fittipaldi, then it's Guzumin and Suzuki, Morbidelli, Hakkinen and Ukio Katayama and Johnny Herbert are on the last and 13th row.
Gerhard Berger now and making his way slowly down the pit lane, so he will not be allowed to start until the entire field has passed the pit exit. So a real disaster for poor Gerhard Berger and of course for McLaren.
Well, they hadn't had their best of luck in the last couple of races, we can say, but here the grid is forming itself. On the left of your screen you can see Nigel Mansell. On the right of your screen, on that front row, is Riccardo Patrese starting his 227th Grand Prix. Mansell here closest to the camera. Then we have Ayrton Senna on that second row. We have the gap, and then we see Michael Schumacher behind Ayrton Senna and Jean Alesi, who has a nice clean road in front of him.
Well, I think the man to watch for here will be Jean Alesi, because he's got the opportunity to stick his Ferrari alongside Ayrton Senna's McLaren if he gets any grip at all. As you're looking at the screen on the right-hand side of the screen, that is the dirty part of the track. Mansell on the left-hand side has got the cleaner part of the track. But watch Jean Alesi, he's the second car in line on the right-hand side as we're looking at it on the screen.
Well, there's the green flag, and now we're waiting for the 5-second board, then the red light to turn on, and then the green to turn on, and we're away, and it's a very good start from Riccardo Patrese. And Riccardo Patrese and Michael Schumacher flooding into third behind Nigel Mansell, and that's a very good stop. But there, Ayrton Senna trying to go right the outside, 2-3 abreast here through that first corner, but it's Riccardo Patrese leading from Nigel Mansell.
And Ayrton Senna used all his Brazilian muscle to get past Michael Schumacher. He came down the outside of Schumacher. Schumacher a little bit cautious going into that first corner.
Oh, and Mansell trying to... Sorry, John. Mansell tried to drive inside Riccardo Patrese, which I don't think was a very wise move on that very first lap. But it's Patrese leading in the Williams. And remember, Patrese who charged here last year at the latter stages of the race when, of course, it started to rain a little bit. But we can see Patrese, Mansell, and then Senna.
Yes, Riccardo Patrese leading, getting the benefit of whatever grip there was on the right-hand side. I think the reason was Mansell was caught unawares. You can see Mansell pulled quickly over to the left, but in fact the red light came on and there was not the required 5 or so seconds between. Now look at Ayrton Senna coming up alongside Schumacher, and then just Schumacher squirreling a little bit, Senna squeezing him. Now Schumacher looking for ground or space, can't find it. Senna's there, not giving way. In the meantime, Patrese took the initiative and taken the lead. But Mansell really caught somewhat unawares by the very rapid change from red to green. We see it, Patrese, Mansell, Senna, Schumacher, Alesi. Good start from Martin Brundle in 6th, Martini 7th, Wendling 8th, Boots in 9th, and Capelli in 10th.
Well, a good bit of racing there on that very first corner. No one really wanted to give way, but no one touching. Everybody got through safe. Riccardo Patrese has a lead of 1 second, 1.04 seconds over Nigel Mansell. There we see the gap. Ayrton Senna another 8 tenths behind, and 7 tenths behind Ayrton Senna is Michael Schumacher.
But it's all academic because the two Williams Renaults are just pulling away, and this is what we had expected to see, although, to be truthful, it was Nigel Mansell we had hoped to see in the front, not Riccardo Patrese.
Well, now, in Mexico, Riccardo told us, John, that he didn't have, we're looking at Gerhard Berger, who's found his way onto the circuit, and he's dead last at the moment.
Well, Berger doesn't look to be running, in fact, at racing speed. He seems to be running around the circuit, almost as if he's about to come into the pit. So we'll have to wait for Berger to get past us just to see whether he has got a problem or whether he's going to come straight in the pit lane.
And already in the pits was Gabriele Tarquini, who's parked his car, so that's one of the heartbeat sensors out of the race. But Nigel Mansell and Riccardo Patrese, we've got an interesting situation, because in Mexico, Riccardo Patrese says there's nothing in my contract that says I cannot win a race.
Well, watch Nigel Mansell. He's now going to make an overtaking maneuver, I believe, on Riccardo Patrese at the end of the straight. He was certainly close enough coming onto the straight. All he has to do is just pick up the two, and hopefully, well, didn't get close enough. Patrese also, I think, determined that he's not just going to hand the lead to Nigel Mansell.
Oh, and that drama for Stefano Modena in the pits, out of the race, one of the Cecil Jordan Yamahas. Well, another disappointing race for Modena, I would say.
Well, very disappointing for the team and Stefano Modena. But here we have these two Williams guys. They're not really racing, but certainly Mansell not terribly impressed with the fact of Patrese out sprinting him into the first corner and appearing to be driving the race on his own, not thinking maybe, as Nigel might hope, as a team.
Well, the advantage Patrese had over Mansell after the second lap was 0.4 of a second. Mansell being much quicker than Riccardo Patrese on that second lap, but it's all, well, wait and see really. Mansell being closer again, and maybe into that first corner, John.
No, he's not close enough coming past the pit. What Mansell, I think, will do, unless he gets a very clear and obvious shot at Patrese, is sit where he is, not hurt his car, not hurt his tyres, and really just take his time, because it would be wrong to push hard at this stage in the race. There's going to be pit stops. He may well be able to overtake Patrese in a pit stop. So at this point in the race, well, Mansell, I think, just sitting within a second of Riccardo Patrese and just consolidate that second place. In the meantime, Senna's now over 3 seconds behind Mansell, and he, of course, has got Michael Schumacher just under a second behind him. But for Senna, he had to be a bit tough at the start. He had to teach Michael Schumacher a few tricks of the trade. That's why he's a world champion.
Well, and a 3-time world champion, rightly so. Johnny Herbert started in 26th position. Well, in the meantime, he's 17th, so Johnny going really well. Talking to Mika Häkkinen after the warm-up, and he said, well, we're looking good for the race because we were only, well, just under a second slower on full tanks than we were in qualifying. So Häkkinen in 21st position and Herbert in the other Lotus in 17th. Yes. As we're nearly another lap gone, lap 4 out of 71.
Well, Patrese, probably a second ahead of Nigel Mansell, but as I say, Mansell just sitting there consolidating. Really not. He had a couple of little looks at Riccardo on the opening laps, deciding that there's a long way to go in this Brazilian Grand Prix. And really, to fight amongst themselves at this stage in the race would be rather stupid. A long race. It is warm, it's very humid. Mansell certainly going to make one stop for tyres and anticipating a second possible stop. But here's the point of the race I think is going to be very interesting. Michael Schumacher, you can see him just behind Ayrton Senna. And Schumacher beginning to close up on Senna, but Michael Schumacher, I think, will find Ayrton Senna a very tough competitor to pass. Schumacher's car has been quicker down the straight than Senna's car, but that's not going to mean that he's going to get past Senna easily.
I don't think anyone will get past Ayrton Senna easily. At the moment in third place, 4.6 seconds behind Nigel Mansell, who's a second behind Riccardo Patrese. But if you look at the lap times, both the Williams are in the 121, then Michael Schumacher is in the 122s, and all the rest is 1:23 or even slower.
Well, this is just in the settling down period of the race. All the tension of the start has evaporated. Now working to find consistency. What's he shaking his hand at? Is that to let Michael Schumacher pass? Senna stuck his right hand up there for some reason, annoyed by something we can't see from the in-car camera.
Well, you can see the speed he's going at, and John, this is 6th gear. If we can stay with Senna, could you go through a lap? Because we haven't really had a full lap yet, have we?
No, we haven't. Senna now. Schumacher getting closer to him, and of course Schumacher's dragging along Jean Alesi and Martin Brundle, who's on Alesi's gearbox. So it's wrong to say that Senna's holding back the three pursuing cars, but now Schumacher right on the gearbox and Alesi and Ayrton Senna struggling the car. The newness of the tires has evaporated. Schumacher needs to be very careful because Alesi will snatch that 4th place off him before he has a chance to think about it. And in that position, Schumacher's position, you must also be aware of what's going on behind you. Your concentration, of course, mostly focused in front of you. Look at Martin Brundle looking to take Alesi's 5th place, but well, it's going to be a little bit of an amusing scenario here, these 3rd through 5th place.
Oh, we've got Mansell and Patrese way ahead of everybody else, and Ayrton Senna, but behind Senna is a train of Schumacher, Alesi, Brundle, and even Pierluigi Martini, who's not far behind. They're all within tenths of each other, and look at that. This is how we would like Grand Prix racing all the time.
Well, I would like to see more of this, but certainly more overtaking. And Michael Schumacher again has dropped back a little bit. He needs to judge where he is strong on the circuit and where Ayrton Senna is weak. So there's no point running close to a car, because by doing so you never get past. You've got to capitalize on your strength, but also capitalize on your opponent's weaknesses.
Well, Senna maybe had a problem on that lap, because his lap time was 1:24.8, and that's, well, 4 seconds slower than Mansell and Patrese, who are leading by half a second. Then it's Ayrton Senna, Michael Schumacher is 4th, Jean Alesi is 5th, and in 6th place at the moment, Martin Brundle in the 2nd Benetton. We'll be back.
Confirmado na prática, reparte-se nas vibrações que o Adriano Cerqueira há pouco salientou dentro do carro de Ayrton Senna, e isto porque este MC47 não dispõe da suspensão ativa, não está dotado desta suspensão, ao contrário do Williams Renault, que tem para além diferente. Para além da suspensão ativa, estas vibrações são absolutamente anormais. No carro antigo, e nós tivemos câmaras no carro antigo que não vibrava das corridas, não havia vibrações nem pouco mais ou menos parecidas com estas, tão violentas. Agora, de novo, a aumentar a diferença entre primeiro e segundo, passou dos 5 décimos para os 9 décimos de segundo. O Senna, que continua a perder, é quase 1 segundo por volta, dos 11 passou para os 12,92. E está ali uma fila bem compacta: Senna, Schumacher, Alesi, Brundle, Martini, Wendlinger, o Busta no Capelli. E julgo que é o Ayrton Senna que está a travar esta gente toda. É o tal carro que serve ali de tampão a toda aquela gente. Cá está a diferença que tínhamos referido entre o Patrese e o Mansell, que voltou a aumentar, quando na 6ª volta tinha ficado em 5 décimos de segundo. E os dois homens da equipa Williams Renault controlam com toda a vontade da corrida. Irão certamente, isto se não se verificarem quaisquer problemas de ordem mecânica, ampliar, aumentar esta vantagem. Há ali uma ultrapassagem em plena reta da meta, mas esta distância não conseguimos distinguir.
Back at Interlagos, where Riccardo Patrese just finishes 8th lap, and Michael Schumacher is passing Ayrton Senna. And I think Senna has a problem, John.
Well, Senna has a problem from the 2nd lap, really. Nice and big. Now Senna's trying to take it back. Michael, shut that door. Don't let Senna have the opportunity. You've worked to get past the guy. What are you doing? You left the door wide open for him to drive straight through.
Well, because of this fight, the gap between Ayrton Senna and Nigel Mansell and Riccardo Patrese is over 16 seconds after 8 laps. Michael Schumacher we can see in 3rd, then Jean Alesi. Then we see Martin Brundle, Pierluigi Martini and Carl Wendlinger in 8th with the march.
Well, that's a problem. Senna's got a problem. I think he's having gear change problems. because you wouldn't suddenly de-accelerate like that. But he got us back into gear. And look at this, and let's watch it again. Schumacher, he's got Senna behind him. He wasn't using his mirrors. He should have just faded across to the left-hand side of the track and blocked Ayrton Senna. Well, I mean, Michael Schumacher is certainly the star, the young and up-and-coming star, but he'll have to learn a little bit quicker than that, because people like Ayrton Senna will take every advantage they can, and that's one of those little salutary lessons that you do learn from a world champion.
Well, Ayrton Senna in fighting spirit in that new McLaren MC47 with the new Honda V12 engine, a brand new package, but it's going, well, it's going not bad, I must say. It's the first time they raced the car. They've had a lot of problems over the weekend, but Senna is holding third place.
Yeah, one of the problems that McLaren have had, apart from being here with 6 cars and trying to run 6 cars, is the actual engine. This new engine is not as powerful as the engine they used last year. The other factor that has really been very impressive up until now is that the gearbox has worked absolutely trouble-free. It appears in the race, though, that Senna has had on 2 occasions so far problems selecting gears. We saw clearly that Senna stopped accelerating. That was when Michael Schumacher got past. Once he got the gear, he didn't have pick-up speed again.
Well, Senna and that big train of cars behind him, containing Schumacher, Alesi, Brundle, Martini, Wendlinger, Boutsen, Capelli. The Cesar is up to 11th. Michele Alboreto and Eric Comes, who was very quick in the morning warm-up, but I think Comes suffers from the fact that you don't have a lot of places to overtake on this racetrack.
Well, now that the cars are so closely concertinaed, it is very difficult indeed, because of course your momentum is governed by the speed of the car ahead of you. And when the cars all group together like this, it's not often you're going to see overtaking. You have to plan it, you've got to work it out. Now, it's not always terribly difficult to work it out, but sometimes it is difficult to execute it.
Well, 10 laps gone out of 71, and another fastest race lap for Nigel Mansell, now down to a 1:20.604, and he's 6/10 of a second behind teammate Riccardo Patrese, who's led this race from the start. He took the lead into that first corner, and he's held it ever since. But another 15 laps to, well, roughly 15 laps to go to the first tyre stops of the year.
And at the speed that Patrese and Mansell are lapping at, they will have lapped the entire field before the race is probably even 3/4 way through. Ayrton Senna managing to hold everybody up to the tune of something like 3.5 seconds a lap slower than the 2 Williams. Of course, the effect is that now from 14th place up to 3rd place, everybody's covered between car to car by 0.2, 0.5 of a second. A long train, all filed behind Ayrton Senna. Michael Schumacher, again, not the part of the circuit you can pass on. And really all Schumacher ought to try to do is, around this slow part of the circuit, is get himself into position and hope that Senna has a problem, or can get onto the pit straight with a little bit of momentum that will carry him up to, now look again, he's trying.
Oh, he's going through? No, he's not.
You see, you can't really get through that. The straight isn't long enough to enable the acceleration to take him up. And Senna, of course, so experienced and so good.
Oh, giving him a defensive driving lesson, I suppose, John.
Absolutely.
Well, John Alesi holding his own in the Ferrari with a 91 NIS spec engine in 5th place at the moment. Then Martin Brundle, who's in 6th, and there's all this big train. But I mean, no doubt that once Schumacher gets past Senna, he'll run away like him, like there's no tomorrow.
Yes, of course, all the time. Look at Martin Brundle now, having a look at John Alesi. Oh, Martin, oh, that was tight. Could have been left Ferrari and front, Benetton right front. But Martin looked at the end of that lap into the Curva de Senna like he was about to have a go at Alesi, and he confirmed that down the back straight, but not really enough. Alesi, of course, one of the last late breakers. Martin just could not get alongside him early enough under braking, had to concede. So Alesi still 5th, Martin Brundle still 6th, but I think Alesi is vulnerable now to Martin Brundle, in as much as Michael Schumacher earlier in the race you saw was vulnerable to John Alesi.
Well, Senna on the part of the circuit where Schumacher had a lap earlier. Patrese and Mansell already way past start-finish. But there comes Ayrton Senna. 2 left-handers to go, and then he's completed 12 laps out of 71.
Now look at Martin Brundle. He's getting into position to pass, or come up to pass John O'Lazy, up past the pits. Watch him pull out. Can he make it? No, he didn't, but he was close. And O'Lazy battling really to maintain 5th place. Martin Brundle becoming more and more aggressive. He tries to wrestle away 5th place from John O'Lazy to get onto the gearbox of his teammate Michael Schumacher, and really that's where he wants to be, because as soon as Schumacher does find a way past Ayrton Senna, then Martin wants to go through in that slipstream.
Well, 12 laps out of 71 have run. We just saw the top positions in vision, and Carl Wendlinger and Pierluigi Martini who follow after that. Top 6, Jerry Boutsen, the Cesaris, Capelli and Alboreto, and also Eric Coves in 13th. They're all part of the Senna train.
Well, we're expecting the first tyre stops somewhere between 25 and 30, but in fact I'm sure we're going to see some people coming in sooner, because in this situation you're abusing your tyres much more than if you're running clean. You're having to compromise, make compromises on braking, on your line in a corner. Of course, you're being disturbed by the aerodynamic effect of other cars ahead of you, and just generally you don't give the tyre the best kind of day that it would like. Look at that Schumacher now again coming up, and Senna in problem. Senna now slowing down. He's got John O'Lazy right behind him. Again, probably a gearbox problem.
O'Lazy is fast.
Yes, O'Lazy, Schumacher and O'Lazy got past. I suspect it's either 4th or 5th gear that Senna's having a problem with. We saw Schumacher do overtake Senna 7 or 8 laps ago, but Senna recovered. But now the problem appears to be much more serious. Schumacher clear, John O'Lazy clear. Now Martin Brundle looking to try and find his way past Ayrton Senna, and a really pretty desperate day for the McLaren team.
Well, Michael Schumacher is 30 seconds, 3-0 behind Patrese and Mansell. We're looking at the man who's only driving in his 9th Grand Prix of his Grand Prix career, who's had his best finish in Mexico, and there Martin Brundle.
Martin squeezed through as well, so don't be surprised that Ayrton Senna may well make a stop into the pits. Of course, if he does, they'll throw a new set of tyres on his McLaren, but I believe that the problem he has is not tyres, it is something in the gearbox. We've seen him twice now have to slow down, changing probably, I think, from 4th to 5th gear. And disappointment indeed for Ayrton Senna here in his home Grand Prix. We saw him win emotionally here last year, but I doubt there's going to be an emotional victory for him in 1992.
Well, Michael Schumacher, who's just on his fastest race lap at 22.6, and there is Senna in problem.
And Martini also now, John O'Lazy.
That must be a replay.
Replay indeed.
John, if you were Patrese, would you go in first, or would you wait till Mansell go and get this?
Well, I think they're going to run like this. Truthfully, if I was in the position of Frank Williams, as much as I love Riccardo Patrese and as much as the team love Riccardo Patrese, I believe that Williams must capitalise on the problems that McLaren are having and give Mansell the largest margin possible over Ayrton Senna, because the championship is over 16 Grand Prix, and I don't believe you can afford to lose 4 points at this stage in the season. Later in the year, it may be possible, if they're running like this, to let Patrese win the race. But right now, if I was the Williams team manager, I would be, at the end of the race, handing out a signal to Riccardo Patrese to say, let Mansell win. But I don't know what's in their contract. Riccardo maintains there is nothing in his contract that says he has to take second place to Nigel Mansell. The only things in his contract relate to this, the use of the spare car, who has first call on the spare car. But it's a team decision, and I'm sure Nigel, come the end of the race, if he is still in second place, will be speaking fairly bluntly to the pits, pointing out the facts that we're just talking about now.
Tracy and Mansell have got 32 seconds over Michael Schumacher. Then it's Jean Alesi, Martin Brundle, Ayrton Senna still in 6th place. 7th is Pierluigi Martini, 8th Carl Wendlinger, 9th Jerry Boutsen, and 10th Andrea de Cesaris, who moved past Ivan Capelli in the 2nd Ferrari. Of course, it's Riccardo Patrese, a veteran of 227 Grand Prix now, and he's only won 5 in his career. A long and impressive career, though.
Yes, more Grand Prix than anybody in Grand Prix racing. Mansell tearing off one of his rip-offs. You see him coming across the start-finish line. He's, of course, running fairly close behind another car. There is road dirt. There is occasionally very fine oil mist, oil haze. Oil tanks, of course, filled to capacity. And sometimes you get a little bit of blowback through the breather. A very, very fine vapor gets on your visor. Makes it difficult to see. And when you take that rip-off off, it's like a brand new world you've come into.
Tracy still having that 0.9 of a second lead over Nigel Mansell, who still holds fastest lap of the race, 1:20.604, which he did on his 10th lap of this race. We're now on our 16th lap, so we're getting closer to the tyre stops, and we can see the tyre wear there. Riccardo Patrese getting it a bit sideways out of that twisty bit. And look at the gap between Mansell and Schumacher, 33.8 seconds. It's a year.
Well, Schumacher's picked up over a second a lap now that he's overtaken Ayrton Senna, but of course over a second slower than the two leading Williams.
Who are leading? What will happen? We can see it after the break. Keep watching Eurosport, because we'll be back from Interlagos.
A bordo do Williams Renault e a bordo do McLaren Honda.
Concluída a 17ª volta, era de 0.9 a diferença na anterior, ligeiramente menor agora, 0.8, enfim, praticamente irrelevante.
E o recorde de Gerhard Berger continua por bater, mas provavelmente vai ser batido.
Sim, os tanques irão ficando cada vez com menos combustível, o carro mais leve. Depois também teremos de confirmar a paragem nas boxes de pneus frescos, que poderão ditar um andamento ainda mais vivo na segunda metade da corrida. Mas esta situação, este domínio do Williams Renault, verificado desde a jornada de abertura, o regresso à África do Sul do Mundial de Fórmula 1, determinou que no Brasil o público, quer pelo preço dos bilhetes, quer por esta paragem de Senna. Paragem de Senna, provavelmente para trocar de... Não, abandono.
É abandono da Ayrton Senna.
Back here at Interlagos, where Ayrton Senna is out of the 1992 Brazilian Grand Prix, and that is not where, well, 70,000 Brazilians come to watch for.
Not at all, a very sad sight.
Dos McLaren, e nomeadamente do tricampeão mundial Ayrton Senna, é a desilusão total aqui.
A cujo acesso não foi permitido à imprensa, a comunicação social, a televisão, tentava mostrar a Ayrton Senna dentro da box, talvez para colher uma reação a quente e uma explicação do motivo do abandono, mas elementos da equipa McLaren vedaram o acesso da câmara da televisão e ao jornalista italiano da RAI, Enzio Zermiani.
É de facto pena, mas mais tarde, em outros serviços noticiosos que enviaremos a partir daqui de Interlagos, São Paulo, Brasil, para a rádio e televisão portuguesa, teremos certamente a oportunidade de relatar.
No, in fact, both the McLarens out of the race. Another bad weekend for the McLaren team. And here we are back live at Interlagos, 19th lap, and very shortly we're going to see those first pit stops start to take place. Michael Schumacher just behind Tarquini in the Fond Metal. Tarquini, in fact, in 2013, 3 laps down, he was been in the pit. Schumacher running some 37 seconds behind the two Williams, running in the 1:22s, the Williams running in the 1:21 second bracket. But really, McLaren have had now 2 successive Grand Prix. Mexico was bad, but here I can't remember the last time, in fact, that both McLarens have not finished a Grand Prix, let alone finish in the top 6.
Well, third place man here in Brazil is Michael Schumacher. As John said, running in the 1:22s, he's losing a second a lap. Although Benetton was one of the teams, John, you thought might try to go a long distance without a tyre stop.
They've got that potential, largely because the car, at its start weight, in other words with its fuel capacity on board, is lighter than most of the other competitors. That's the benefit of the Ford HB engine. It is very frugal, it uses less fuel per horsepower than any other engine. But I think really tyre performance will be more critical. He will probably make a stop. But with the lead that Williams have, Well, what knows? They may decide to try. Williams will probably lose something like 30 seconds. The time that they come in, make the tyre stop, go back out again. That window is probably about 30 seconds, so it's a gamble. The strategy that Benetton have, to some extent, may be dictated by the speed that the Williams cars can come in and out of the pits. So maybe Schumacher, one of the leisure cars, to make a pit stop. But at the end of the day, I suspect that the performance of the tyre will deteriorate to the point where the time lost in the pits is less than the time lost on the track by not making a stop.
Nigel Mansell sitting comfortably behind Riccardo Patrese. I suppose Nigel will wait until the pit stops are going to come, and then we see the two teammates, the white number 6 and the red number 5. And in its 121s, and I mean, they don't seem to be pushing that hard.
Well, they're not too hard for a Sunday afternoon run, I can promise you that. When they're driving hard, or as hard as they feel is prudent, they don't want to go absolutely flat out because there's no point in that. Mansell really hasn't had an opportunity, a clear opportunity to take the lead. So the situation, I think, will remain as we see on the road until we come to the pit stop. Then anything can happen. And who will come in first is a question of, I think the team will make that decision. They may choose to bring in Patrese first, since he's the man who is, let's say, is the more expendable of the two. But Williams totally in control, utterly dominant here this weekend, as they have been over the previous 2 Grand Prix. And really everybody else has got so much work to do to narrow the gap. And remember, this is Williams' 1991 car. It's also a modified version of the 91 engine. They've still got the 92 car to come, and Renault have still got their 92 engine to appear. So the opposition, well, difficult times ahead.
But also it's a funny game, motor racing, John, as you know.
There's a penalty there on the right-hand side of your screen.
Yeah, Christian is in 20th place in this race. He's just been lapped. He's 1 lap behind, and Christian had to appear before the stewards in the meeting this morning for making practice starts during the morning warm-up.
Yes, drivers used to do that quite a lot, but now there are so many rules and regulations on Mansell. Look, closed right up onto the gearbox of Patrese. He's closer to Patrese here than we've seen for quite some time.
Well, Patrese trying to lap Ukiyo Katayama.
Blue flags being waved at Katayama. Of course, Patrese will pay no attention to that blue flag. He knows Nigel Mansell's behind him. This is an opportunity for Mansell because his momentum will not be lost quite as much as Patrese. Katayama ahead of Riccardo Patrese, the lead of these 3 cars. We're looking at it from Nigel Mansell's cockpit. Patrese really didn't judge that situation with Katayama very well. Mansell trying to slide through. I hope Katayama is aware that Mansell is on his left-hand side. Both through safely. Well done, Mr. Katayama. He's acquitted himself very well indeed with Formula One, because in a car that isn't necessarily particularly competitive, you've got to look ahead of yourself, but also be aware of what is going on behind you. And sometimes you might see the one car, but you're not aware that there are 2 or possibly 3 cars all looking to get past at one time. Well, Katayama did a good job there, that both Williams through and didn't really impede either driver. No one won, no one lost any ground.
Well, we've got a Williams pair in the lead, as we did have in Mexico and South Africa. It's just a different driver leading at the moment.
Yes, Mansell's quicker around this part of the circuit. We've seen him now close up to Patrese. And I suspect Mansell really is going to try, if he's going to make an overtaking maneuver, to do it as we come past the pits into the tight downhill left-hand corner. But he's got to make his preparation from here. He's got to be on it hard here and drive his Williams up to behind Patrese's Williams. And then as they come past the start-finish line, pull out and dive down the inside. But he's not close enough this time. But he is, in fact, getting closer each lap.
0.4 of a second was the difference on lap 22. Lap 23, well, it's 200th of a second closer. It's, well, not a lot. Nigel Mansell in 2nd place, and the Cesares.
Well, watch Mansell here is another opportunity. He's sticking his nose out, just telling Riccardo Patrese, I am behind you and I'm now looking to get past I'm capable of lapping faster than you're running. So Mansell now deciding his time has come to vacate the lead. Riccardo Patrese has maintained since the lights went red to green. It was a very rapid change, catching a lot of people unawares. Mansell, that's 0.4 of a second behind Patrese. Patrese, you could just see a little bit of understeer with his car through that downhill left-hand corner. And that's maybe why Mansell is a little bit quicker through the slower sections of the circuit. Patrase's car, the front end pushing, which is an indication that Patrese may well want to make a pit stop shortly to put some fresh good GST compound tires, get back out again and as soon as possible.
Well, missing from 9th place at the moment is Andrea de Cesaris, who we don't see coming past the pits now. We haven't seen him. We don't know whether he's in the pits or stranded out on the circuit. Andrea, he's 2 laps behind. We've missed him for the last 2 laps. Well, that moves even Capelli and all the rest behind even up to even 1 place. So Capelli now up to 9th, and De Cesaris, after a good showing again, out of the race.
Well, we see the Benetton pit now preparing for, well, I don't know who's going to come in first. Will it be Brundle or Schumacher? Schumacher currently 3rd, Brundle running in 5th place. But the focus really on Mansell and Patrese. Patrese still leading by just 0.2 of a second. Again, Mansell right on the gearbox of Patrese. Mansell's car working better in the lower speed parts of the circuit, but he's not being able. Here we see the Benetton coming in.
Oh, and Schumacher is the first one in. Michael Schumacher, the first man. But we thought maybe the man who could go the distance on.
And a good stop for Schumacher. 7.55 seconds, gets him back out. But of course, he's lost. He'll probably come past somewhere 10th, 12th. Cars running in 6th, down to 14th position, covered by about 8 seconds. So Schumacher will have dived back onto the track right between the two of them, but look at Mansell again. Closer, closer, closer to Riccardo Patrese, one of the two.
Venturi, the Rouge car.
We can't see which one it is.
Bertrand Gachot, who's out of the race. His, well, car doesn't want to go any further. Maybe the new Lamborghini engine, maybe a gearbox, who will say, but Bertrand Gachot, after another good showing, I must say, because he was fast in this morning's warm-up and he qualified really well with that car out of the Brazilian Grand Prix.
Yes, he was running in 17th slot, along with a lot of other people very close to him. But Gachot, his day is over. Yet again, Patrese under pressure from Mansell. Mansell pushing him all the time in this slow part of the circuit. All very strange Brazilian names of these corners, unpronounceable.
Well, we can pronounce one, well, that's the Curva de Senna. Of course, Ayrton Senna not in the race anymore, and John Alesi in the pits for new tyres. And what's his time going to be?
Well, a great stop, 6.31. Great stop. Oh, look at that, somebody's coming in as Alesi goes out.
And that was one of the Ligiers, yes, I thought.
One of the Ligiers coming in as Alesi. Dropped the clutch, 15,000 revs on the clock. So Alesi would have to back off to let the Ligier take its pit position, and negating any advantage that superb Ferrari's pit stop might have given him.
Well, and the question still is which of those two Williams cars is going to get into the pits first. We've seen Michael Schumacher on lap 24, and if I was Patrese, I would get in now.
Well, yes, there's a lot of traffic ahead, and that traffic's not going to help Patrese very much, so it may be an opportunity for him to make a pit stop, get back out again, make full use of his new tyres with a track that will be relatively uncluttered when he goes back onto it. And really now the strategy of the team becoming very important indeed. Of course, Williams very comfortably in the lead, well over 30 seconds ahead of third place man, who we yet have to see who it is.
Well, John, also, if Patrese gets into the pits now, if Mansell is able to run quicker, basically he won't, because he's got all that traffic to contend with. Brundle was in third, Brundle was still in third, but he's into the pits for his tyre stop.
Well, Brundle, when he made the stop, was 54 seconds behind Mansell. Again, a great stop from the Benetton, two superb stops from the Benetton team, 1.775, Brundle 7.25. Mansell dropped back from Riccardo Patrese. And look at all that traffic. These are the midfield men.
Mika Häkkinen in the Lotus, who's about to be left. Lotus that hopes to have the new car in Barcelona, the new Lotus 107, and that might have active suspension as well.
Well, Lotus pioneered active suspension. In fact, they were the team that won the first Grand Prix with an actively suspended car. Now, Mika Häkkinen, you stopped Nigel going through there. I know you're driving a Grand Prix, but I have to say, you wouldn't have lost anything. Now, again, look, he's racing Mansell. What is he doing? Normally, Mika's very good with his mirrors, but that time, I think that he wasn't being careful enough. But Lotus won Monaco in 87, and they won Detroit 87 with their actively sprung Honda-powered Lotus. And of course, Ayrton Senna was the man behind the wheel. So he's got something in history to be proud of. First active suspension Grand Prix victory.
Now, Carl Wendlinger, who's made his pit stop, has dropped down to 15th place. And as we can see, Riccardo Patrese and Nigel Mansell in traffic, just about to complete another lap. It's Michael Schumacher who's back in third, 1 minute and 4 seconds behind Nigel Mansell. And there's Ivan Kapelian.
Well, we saw a great stop from Jean Alesi. This one's also great. Alesi not just quite so quick, dropping the clutch, but still two superb stops from Ferrari and two superb stops from the Benetton team.
Well, 6.82 and 6.31 for the Ferrari team.
Well, Patrese now behind Olivier Grillard. Grillard has also been a difficult man in the past to get past. Now, Grillard, what are you doing? Oh my goodness! Olivier Grillard, your mirrors are there to be used. You're not using them. Mansell now. Look at Mansell. Well, he's in the wrong place. Patrese will just shut the door. But that is really something we've seen from Olivier Grillard a number of occasions. Certainly he did it when he had very uncompetitive machinery. He now has got much more competitive. Well, he's woken up. He's suddenly seen that there are two Williams behind him. Made way for them to go past, but I have to say at the end of the straight he could well have taken the race leader out of the race. Patrese relying very much on Grillard, giving him the corner. Grillard didn't do that. Williams pits now very much prepared for Patrese or Mansell to dive in. If I was Mansell, I'd be in the pit straight away.
Well, Michael Schumacher on his new set of tyres doing a 1:21.7. That's quicker than he'd gone before in this race, but the gap is 1:03, and Mansell is the first Williams in.
Yes, well, I think that's sensible for Mansell to get in. He's getting held up in this traffic. He is better to go in, fit new tyres, come out. Hopefully he'll have a clear track and can claw back the time that he and undoubtedly Riccardo Patrese are losing in that gaggle of traffic ahead of them. That's a cautious stop from Mansell and the Williams team, 8.5 seconds. Nigel Mansell really wanting to make sure, as the Williams team did, that there were no problems. We saw in Portugal last year when Mansell really lost the World Championship, could we say, when there was a problem with the right rear wheel. But no such problems this time. Mansell back out. Look at that clear track ahead of him. He can fully capitalise on his fresh tyres.
So we're now waiting for the race leader to get into the pits, and I think the window Goodyear said was quite right, between lap 25 and 30. All the drivers get into the pits.
Well, that really, Mansell, I have to say, is the race leader now. Technically he's not, because Riccardo Patrese is of course ahead of him. But Mansell, who came in early, has got a clear road. He will now be able to take full advantage of those new tyres, while Riccardo Patrese is still fighting his way through the slower cars, the ones that they were having to lap.
If we go through the top six, it's Patrese, Mansell, Schumacher, Eric Comas up to fourth, John Alesi in fifth, and Martin Brundle up to sixth place.
Of course, Comas is the one of the top six who has not made a pit stop. 4 tyres.
And something that should make you smile, John. Mauricio Guzman up to 7th place with Jordan Yamaha.
Well, I have to say, as much as I'm smiling for the team, I would say that Guzman has not yet been in the pits. But the Jordan team we're talking about, maybe they had the possibility, like Benetton, to go through without a pit stop. But at the end of the day, I imagine that the advantage of coming in outweighs any of staying out and trying to get through on one set of tyres. The Goodyear believe that everybody really will need to make a pit stop for tyres. It is a very abrasive circuit. The seed compound they run here is the same compound they used in Mexico, but this surface in Interlagos is very, very much more abrasive, and it's really more a question of wear than anything else.
Nigel Mansell's lap, including that pit stop, was a 1:37.063, so we could say he's losing roughly 16 seconds, including the stop and including in and out of the pit.
Well, I don't think Riccardo Patrese, if he does make a pit stop, can do it under the 20 seconds. And
Alesi?
Yes, Alesi has collided with another, we can't see who it is.
It's Martin Brundle, or it is Martin Brundle?
Yes, Brundle and Alesi. Brundle, I think, trying to get past John Alesi. Two cars collided, and now we see Riccardo Patrese in the pits. And this is where I believe we'll see Nigel Mansell take the lead of the race. Slightly quicker pit stop, but in fact, slower getting into gear. You can see that Patrese was not in gear in that pit stop. He put it into first gear, the car lurched, and then he dropped the clutch. So he lost over a second in that pit stop to Nigel Mansell, plus what I consider was time that he would have lost running behind those slower cars. So as the cars will come round, they're on the 32nd lap. At the end of this 32nd lap, we will see, I believe, Mansell in the lead, Patrese second.
Mansell is leading because he was just right in front of the two cars that were driving out of the picture. One of them was Carl Wendlinger, and there an unhappy man, Martin Brundle. Another disappointing finish to a promising race.
Well, Brundle was doing a good job. He was running strongly. He had a good pit stop. But John Alesi is another man who's hard to pass. He's one of the late breakers, we have said earlier. And you've got to be absolutely 100% alongside. Here we see it. Well, we can't really see who was doing what. We're saying Martin was trying to pass Alesi, but whatever the outcome was, Martin Brundle out of the race. John Alesi with a few scars on the side of his Ferrari. And Alesi still running in 5th place. Some 5 seconds behind Eric Comas, who has yet to make a pit stop. Comas some 12 seconds behind Michael Schumacher.
And then in 6th place at the moment is Mauricio Gugelmin, but as you said, Mauricio also still having to make that pit stop. But Nigel Mansell is leading the Brazilian Grand Prix on lap 32. He's got 5.3 seconds over Riccardo Patrese, and look at Nigel's lap time, a 764. Well, and that is quick.
Well, that's his response to Riccardo Patrese, leading him for some 30 laps in the race, and he's just saying to Riccardo and the team, I'm the #1 driver in this team, whatever the contract says.
Well, 5 seconds the difference between the two leaders. We'll be back after the break.
His teammate, Ivan Capelli, who has, and in 6th position now, it is, believe it or not, Michele Alboreto in the footwork Mugen. And this is the first time that I can remember a footwork as opposed to an arrows being in the points. The last time I can remember one of that team's cars finishing in the points was Caffey, 5th place at Monaco in 1990. They've had a very barren period, and Alboreto is fighting back in the points, the Italian veteran, ex-Ferrari driver. But the Williams cars are well away now, 40 seconds ahead of Schumacher, and it seems to be just a case of keeping them running, and whether Mansell, as he laps the Ligier, can get well away. He's in the lead now, and he's just got to be very careful as he threads his way through the field, as out of the pits goes Mauricio Gugelmin in the Jordan Yamaha. He lives in Curitiba in Brazil. Well, now Riccardo Patrese has got a major problem now. The problem, of course, is that he knows that it's his teammate Nigel Mansell, who won in South Africa, who won in Mexico, who is in such dominant form this year, who is ahead of him. And certainly Riccardo has lost the psychological advantage of being that much ahead of Nigel.
Estamos de novo em direto a partir de Interlagos, São Paulo, Grande Prémio do Brasil. Comandante é Nigel Mansell. Nigel Mansell, depois daquela troca de pneus e daquela confusão, naturalmente, que gerada por aquelas paragens, foram 2 voltas consecutivas de paragens dos 2 pilotos da frente, portanto...
Welcome back live here at Interlagos in Brazil, where we're watching the 3rd Grand Prix of the 1992 season. and it's Nigel Mansell, Red Knights, John, who's leading this Grand Prix. 5.5 seconds in front of teammate Riccardo Patrese. The Williams 1-2 whoops is 3 seconds, and it's a new fastest lap and lap record for Riccardo Patrese on that very last lap. Just as I was saying, the gap was 5.4 seconds.
Yes, well, Mansell's now got the traffic that he avoided when he made his pit stop. Riccardo Patrese has been able to run relatively clear of traffic now. He's caught up to the two Ligiers of Comas and Boutsen. So that will impede his progress momentarily. We saw back in Mexico that the two Ligiers caused that little bit of difficulty Martin Brundle had when he had Gerhard Berger running on his gearbox. So now Riccardo Patrese, well, he's been allowed through. Boutsen pulling over to the left. I think Patrese through now. He's got to contend with Eric Comas. Comas running an 8th and Boutsen 9th, but of course they're now one lap down.
Massey, Michael Schumacher in third, and Riccardo Patrese in second, Nigel Mansell in first, but Thierry Boutsen and Eric Comas 8th and 9th at the moment, and in all three races so far we've seen them around that area, around this stage of the race, and every time Comas a little bit quicker than Thierry Boutsen.
Yes, Nigel just getting past Michele Alboreto. Alboreto currently 6th. Again, we don't believe that Alboreto has had a pit stop. The best performance we've seen so far this year from the Footwork Mugen team. They're gradually coming to terms with their Mugen V10 engine. That was the engine that Honda used back in 1990. Won championships with Mansell, Patrese, first and second Patrese. Again, getting that, you know, it's very difficult. Your rhythm gets so disturbed when you're coming up through the back markers, and what you need to do is at times on the straight is just maybe even lift off early, not to overrun the car that you want to pass. It's very important to make your judgment about how you're going to pass, where you're going to pass, and sometimes you lift off earlier than you would ordinarily do. Sometimes you've got to go very, very late and very deep. But once you put yourself alongside the car, then of course you've compromised the other car anyway. But your times tend to seesaw by up to half a second, maybe a second in some cases.
Patrese trying to lap Johnny Herbert, who is in 7th place, and I think for the moment that'll be the drive of the race. Johnny coming from the very last row of the grid up to 7th place. Well, good achievement indeed with the Lotus 102 with the Ford HB engine. Mansell, Patrese, Schumacher, that is the top three at the moment. And remember, you're watching it live here on Eurosport. Patrese slowly getting through that traffic. The gap back to 5.8 seconds. Just what Nigel wants, I suppose. A nice 5-6 second gap. And he'll try and hang on to that for the remainder of this race, John.
Yes, I'm sure that 5 seconds is a comfortable enough lead for him, particularly with your teammate behind you. But we've seen in the previous Grand Prix that Nigel's not content with 5 seconds. He wants 15 or 20 seconds. And he knows that Riccardo is strong. He will push very, very hard. But right now, really, there's no purpose in either driver doing more than they're doing. They're running in the low 1:21, high 120s. And that's all they have to do. Schumacher, 44.5 seconds behind. No threat whatsoever. So really, the team, I'm sure, talking to both drivers, saying just maintain your pace. There's nothing to fight for. Let's get this race under our belts and go home with Nigel Mansell and Riccardo Patrese, first and second in the Drivers' Championship. And of course, the Williams Renault team leading the Manufacturers' Championship
by a long, long margin at the moment. And
look at this. Oh, we saw that coming. That was as clear. And Johnny Herbert taken out as well. Well, that was a little bit fundamental, I have to say. What Thierry Boutsen hoped to try to do with his teammate Eric Comas, I'm not quite sure, but certainly that will not endear Thierry Boutsen to Mr. Guy Ligier. He'll have been sitting back in Vichy glued to his set, I hope, watching Eurosport Live. And really very, very unimpressive.
Well, that wasn't really on that maneuver, I think.
Not at all.
Thierry.
Not at all. Thierry was not close enough. He put himself on look, and then Johnny Herbert, who really had done nothing wrong at all, had Boutsen reverse into his left front wheel, into the sand trap. Well, Johnny's out, Bootson's out, Eric Cummins, we don't know whether he's struggled round a lap.
Well, I'm happy I don't have to phone Guy Ligier to tell him this news.
Well, I think that whoever does it, it's not going to be Thierry, but I think Thierry should be the first person to get on the phone and apologise to his team leader for a really sort of fundamental error.
The Ligier team was looking for a points finish here in Brazil, and both drivers being in 8th and 9th position, I think they could have gone on to finish in the points, and also Johnny Herbert, but that's motor racing, I suppose. It moves a lot of people up at the moment. Eric Comas, who's still on our screen, but I don't think he'll be going around much longer. Carl Wendlinger is now well into the top 10 with the March and the Ulmer engine, and again, the Ulmer engine being a reliable and powerful package.
Well, Nigel Mansell, Riccardo Patrese. Mansell now beginning to extend his lead as we've seen him do previously. Just over 8 seconds again. A 1 minute 19 second lap from Nigel Mansell. Playing the traffic, I feel, probably more to his advantage than Riccardo Patrese is able to do at this point. And you know, that situation we've just seen with Boutsen and Comas, it could so easily have involved this man Riccardo Patrese, because only a lap earlier he was passing those two Ligiers. Schumacher now 46 seconds behind Patrese, some 54 seconds in total behind Nigel Mansell. Alesi still 4th, Capelli 5th, Alboreto 6th. We've still got Comas running in 7th place, Wendlinger 8th, Morbidelli 9th, and Olivier Grillard in 10th place.
Well, and everybody bar Riccardo Patrese, Michael Schumacher and Jean Alesi is one more lap down. The caption on that screen is not really right, because Riccardo Patrese is not 1 lap behind Nigel Mansell, but he's only 9.1 seconds behind Nigel Mansell. 39 laps completed out of 71 here at Interlagos, where it's hot, it's humid, and John, the circuit's anti-clockwise.
Yes, one of the few circuits that is anti-clockwise. Of course, the first race of the year at Kailami was another anti-clockwise circuit. But of course, Interlagos, really a very demanding circuit, even in this reduced, virtually half distance, half the length of the original circuit. Mansell trying to get past Katayama for a second time. Really somewhat academic, because he's just going to power past him coming up past the pits. Katayama pulling over to the right. Mansell goes through. No problems whatsoever.
We still see the yellow flags because of that incident earlier on with Thierry Boutsen, Eric Comas and Johnny Herbert as an innocent victim of that coming together. And this one's right. Mansell, Patrese, Schumacher and Alesi, then even Capelli and Michele Alboreto, they're a lap behind. And Michele Alboreto, I must say, I think happy to be back in the top 6, as is his team boss, Jackie Oliver.
Well, very much so. The team had a difficult first and second race of the season. Then we saw a lot of promise on Friday in the untimed and timed sessions. Then it's faded a little bit on the Saturday. Now it appears reappearing, and the trouble really that Woodwork have got is to learn how to make use of that V10 engine. It is heavy, it is tall, it is long. A lot of the weight in the engine is at the back of the engine, where it really is the worst place for it to be. But they're getting to grips with it, and really, they're like many teams this season. They didn't get as much pre-race testing as they would have liked. A lot of it was done in the UK. Of course, weather in the UK in February, not as good as it is here now, of course, in Brazil, where it's really hot. It's very humid, and that's really the strength of a team, that it can get its act together while it's still racing.
Well, Nigel Mansell being lucky there, the yellow flag's just been taken away when he was going to lap John Alesi. Because, of course, under a yellow flag, you're not allowed to overtake, and, well, you face possible disqualification, John.
You could indeed. Well, the Williams team looked quite relaxed about everything. Drinks being passed out. Situation, Mansell is still just over 8 seconds ahead of Riccardo Patrese. Michael Schumacher way back in third. Then John Alesi some 23 seconds behind Schumacher.
Well, Michael Schumacher is the only man on the same lap as the two Williamses. Schumacher, who's still got a cross-start finish. I mean, he has... Well, I mean, Mansell has a lead. You just cannot believe, I suppose. 8.3 seconds is a big lead over your teammate. But then Patrese has 50 seconds over Michael Schumacher. So Mansell's lead is, well, nearly a minute.
Yes, it is. And we're talking about a lap of 1 minute 21 seconds. So I would think with Mansell able to lap at least a second a lap quicker, we ought to see Michael Schumacher before the end of this race being lapped, assuming that everyone is running at the end of the race at the pace they are now. But this is all really somewhat academic, and all it is doing is just reinforcing the dominance that we're seeing from the Williams team this year. Everybody was a little bit skeptical about the reliability of the reactive suspension the Williams team has used. They committed to using it after years of testing, but it's been proved to be correct from the Williams team. And aren't they ever benefiting from the uncompetitiveness of the opposition?
Well, Mansell leads, Riccardo Patrese. We'll be back after the break.
Portanto, há muito tempo que não se via uma corrida sem McLaren, uma corrida em que os carros vermelho e branco tenham desaparecido tão cedo da prova.
E também é a primeira vez esta época que os Ferrari estão a aguentar tanto em prova. Recordo que quer na África do Sul, quer no México, tanto o Capelli como o Alesi abandonaram com problemas de motor. Sempre problemas de motor. Aqui, pelo menos até agora, os motores da Ferrari estão a aguentar o esforço numa pista onde se faz sentir bastante calor e que é sempre desgastante para os motores. E é uma pista, e essa mudança de pneus é a indicação precisa, digamos que abrasiva para os pneus Frank Williams, naturalmente concentrado, mas...
Back live here at Interlagos in Brazil for the third Grand Prix, the 1992 Grand Prix season. Eric Comas, after his coming together with Thierry Boutsen out of the race, so is Mauricio Guzman, Thierry Boutsen and Johnny Herbert. Gabriele Tarquini, who is 5 laps behind at the moment, but sometimes still going round. Stefano Modena is out, Gerhard Berger, Ayrton Senna.
Terá ficado afetada pelo empate no carro de Boutsen. Que, repito, quanto a mim, é Eric Comas quem faz a falta, fechando o seu companheiro de equipe. Portanto, os dois Ligier fora de prova. Wendlinger passa para a 7ª posição, Morbidelli é o 8º, Gruyar 9º, Mika Hakkinen 10º, Christian Fittipaldi 11º, Katayama 12º, Lepso 13º e Tarquini 14º.
27 voltas para o final.
Mansell rodando agora em 1.20.13, Patrese 1.20.24.
É muito semelhantes os andamentos dos dois Williams, primeiro e segundo.
We're seeing a high retirement rate here. Riccardo Patrese running in second place. The two Williams leading the race and running like clockwork. John Alesi now going to be lapped by Riccardo Patrese. He's already a lap down on the race leader Nigel Mansell. Mansell some 9.2 seconds ahead of Riccardo Patrese. Really, these two Williams running at a speed which is in a different world to the opposition. Michael Schumacher there, still running in third place, and really, Benetton, that's the best I think that they can expect from their current equipment. Again, they've got a brand new car. It's going to be tested on Tuesday at Silverstone. Quite a different car to this B191B, which we see. Of course, it'll still retain the Ford HP V8 engine, the new Cosworth Ford V12 engine, which is about to start chassis testing very shortly. Isn't expected to be seen in a race car at a Grand Prix until probably the very end of the season, but more than likely the 1993 season. So the Benetton team is going to have a dual program going on with the brand new car, with the current Ford HP V8, And the existing car with the V12 Ford engine, which of course is going to be another very compact and very light engine.
Well, Christian Fittipaldi, we can see his pulse rate 148. The higher low, John? You should
I would say that's pretty low, in fact, because, well, he's a young man, he's very, very fit. So really, at the race that he's having, he's not having to race hard. He's just basically going through the motions. I mean, he may not agree with that, but I mean, he's not really having to do an awful lot of hard work. He hasn't got people he's looking to take position from. He's not under pressure from someone behind him. So around 150 heartbeats per minute. He will, of course, have spikes. He misses a gear change, or maybe he misses his braking point, so it might momentarily, let's say, leap up to the 180s. But that's a very, very brief, I would say 150, where his pulse rate is right now, is about right for a young man in this position in his home Grand Prix.
Well, he's in 11th place at the moment, and Christian Fittipaldi before the race said we want to do a lot of laps for that new Lamborghini engine, and that's just what the man's doing. Mansell, Tracy, Schumacher, that's the top three. Then John Alesi in fourth, Ivan Capelli is fifth, Michele Alboreto sixth, Carl Wendlinger seventh, Gianni Morbidelli in the fastest Minardi Lamborghini is in 8th place. Then it's Olivier Grouillard in 9th, and 10th Mika Häkkinen. And that's after 45 out of 71 laps. But no one can touch Nigel Mansell. He's 10.3 seconds in front of teammate Riccardo Patrese, and that is a long, long way.
Yes, Mansell really now running at the pace that he's comfortable in, and it's quick enough to just gradually draw further ahead from Riccardo Patrese. Patrese really not attempting to respond to Mansell's lead. And I do suspect that once the pit stops determined the lead on the track, that really would have been the end of the story. I'm sure Riccardo has been informed that don't push Mansell, don't try to make any more of a race of it than you did before the pit stops. Your day will come, Riccardo, and let Mansell capitalise, get 30 points in the bin, because when we come to Spain, the first of the European Grand Prix, believe me, Ron Dennis and his McLaren team are not going to be running at the level they've been running here this weekend.
Now, talking about the McLaren team, a lot of people say, whoa, the Williams team, they're so much better than anyone else, but not so long ago we had those red and white cars being way, way ahead of anybody else.
Yes, they were, but in fact last year on performance, probably over the course of the year, the Williams was the most competitive car. But it had a lot of unreliability problems, and of course there's a few cockpit problems as well. But the team have really done an outstanding job over the winter. They did a lot of testing with the active ride suspension, further refinement to the gearbox, and take no credit away, Renault have done a fantastic job. And we had Nigel at the end of the year really labouring the point that Honda had stolen a march over Renault in the second half of the season. Well, Renault and Elf, the fuel suppliers, have done a really great job. They've got an engine that is quick, it's reliable. Well, they've just done what Williams have done, provided the most competitive equipment for their two drivers in 1992. Yeah, the heart rate now up to 175. Do you think that's because Michael Schumacher's behind him, or just he's suddenly getting his act together and getting on with the program a bit more?
Well, it's higher than what we're having at the moment here in the commentary booth, although it's about, I think, low to mid-80s outside. It's probably low to mid-90s inside here, but Christian Fittipaldi, well, might have a little fried. He might have seen Michael Schumacher and been thinking, where is the man going to overtake me? And there he goes through, just before the point where Senna and Mansell had a slide coming together yesterday.
Well, Christian had to move over. He had to go a little bit wide on the entry. Of course, he had picked up a lot of rubber and dirt on his tyres, but safely through for Schumacher. And it was interesting, that little pulsometer that we see from time to time with Fittipaldi. I suspect if we get to see him again on his own, his pulse rate will be back down to the 148, 150 beats per minute. You know, that's the kind of heart rate that you'd expect a marathon runner to be exerting, so it puts it sometimes into context. That's the heart rate that a driver will maintain for the hour and 3/4 of this Grand Prix. And that is the kind of fitness a Grand Prix driver needs. He doesn't need to be built like Charles Atlas. He needs to have stamina, and really, most importantly, it's not just the stamina, it's the ability to recover quickly from that exertion. Because throughout the course of a race, you have moments of intense concentration and exertion, other moments where you can cruise and catch your breath. And it's that ability to recover quickly that is the indication of true fitness. And in my opinion, the fittest man in a Grand Prix car is Ayrton Senna. And really, his level of fitness is equal to that of any Olympic athlete. A remarkable athlete in himself.
Well, we're on our 50th lap out of 71. It's Nigel Mansell who leads, Riccardo Patrese who's second, then Michael Schumacher, John Alesi is fourth, Ivan Capelli up to fifth place. First points finisher would be for Capelli, and Michele Alboreto in sixth place. And of course, first point finish for Capelli in a Ferrari, that is. Carl Wendlinger still seventh in front of Gianni Morbidelli, who's eighth, and Olivier Grouillard, who's ninth.
Well, Ferrari will be keeping everything crossed for Capelli and John Alesi. This revised 1991 engine, they've finally pitched the 92 engine for the time being, and going back to the old engine, which was somewhat more reliable. Just looking at Alesi's right front, there looks like a little bit of graining or possibly blistering in that right front tire, and that could be something caused by... That doesn't look quite so bad in that shot, just depending how the light fell on the tires. But when you put fresh tires on, the temptation is to go out and stand on them, take full advantage. These Goodyear race tires have got quite a depth of tread, the rubber, not the actual tread on the tire, but the depth of rubber on the surface of the tire is quite deep, and you have to treat it carefully in the early laps when the tire is fresh, not to put too much heat into it. That can cause the tire to blister, and of course then the subsequent drop off in performance. But Nigel Mansell, and really the in-car camera lies, because Mansell's having a lot more work than we see here. I mean, it looks really very easy indeed. What you're not feeling at home, of course, are the physical loads, the G-forces that are on his body, particularly on his neck. You see him dipping his head into the corner as he turns in there. That just helps alleviate some of the loads. Even in the low speed corners, those loads are tiring. You're getting up to 4.5 G applied laterally every lap for something like an hour and a half. And that's why racing drivers got necks on them like Mike Tyson.
Well, what we're not seeing, but we see here on the monitor, is that Michele Alboreto is closing the gap with Ivan Capelli. It's now 1.7 seconds and closing. Could have a fight there. We see it. Both drivers one lap behind. Ivan Capelli in fifth place and Michele Alboreto in sixth. John Alesi is fourth, and here we see the places 7 to 12.
And there we see Nigel Mansell now within about 5 seconds of third place man Michael Schumacher. Well, we've seen dominance like this in the 80s, first from McLaren, then from Williams, then again from McLaren, really since end of 85, 86, 87. Williams with their Honda V6 turbos were the team to beat. But other than that, it's been a McLaren wipeout, and well, the clock's going back, and it's now the turn of Williams with their V10 Renault engine, who were the dominant team in 1992.
You're watching Eurosport Live, the Brazilian Grand Prix from Interlagos. We'll be back.
Continua a ser o alemão Michael Schumacher no seu Benetton Ford. Dentro de algumas voltas mais teremos Nigel Mansell muito próximo de Schumacher, e certamente irá... Já está, ali está, foi mais rápido do que nós pensávamos. Depois os Ferraris de Alesi e Ivan Capelli, portanto o quarto e quinto classificados. Mansell mais rápido que Patrese. Mansell espreita agora o sítio onde poderá dobrar Schumacher, e apenas ficarão os dois pilotos da Williams na mesma volta. Ali ainda não dá. Voltamos ao interior do carro de Mansell. Ele não tem pressa nenhuma. Tem tanta volta para conseguir consumar a ultrapassagem. E mais uma vez chamamos a atenção do senhor espectador para as menores vibrações no interior do Williams, relativamente àquelas que vimos no início da corrida com o McLaren no MP47 do Ayrton Senna. De facto, é incrível o comportamento de um e outro carro, a melhor estabilidade, o melhor comportamento, o volante com menos vibrações, toda a suspensão por parte do Williams, que é equipado com as denominadas... Agora pode dar travagem para o resto do Senna, facilmente.
Here, and you see, back here in Interlagos, I should say, that Nigel Mansell, I think, teaching Michael Schumacher a little lesson, John.
Yes, Nigel thought that Michael hadn't been quite so cooperative, and he just, after he took his foot off the brakes, he allowed his Williams to run just slightly wide and made Schumacher turn right instead of turning left. You know, it's an old master teaching a future master. Another little... Michael Schumacher's learned, I think, 2 or 3 tricks in this Grand Prix. Not that really Schumacher did anything particularly wrong, but of course Nigel feels... Look, let's see it again. Mansell now coming down the inside. Oh, foot off the brake. Just run a little bit into the middle of the road. Oh, sorry, Michael. Scusi. Didn't mean to do that. Get the message, son?
Yeah, we saw that last night in that second qualifying session.
Well, let's not talk about that. A few bruised egos and whatever, but Michael Schumacher wasn't really necessary for Nigel to do that, but of course he is the race leader, and it is the duty of everybody else on the racetrack to recognise that and to allow the leader to go through as unimpeded as is possible.
Well, he's leading by over 10 seconds still, and there Olivier Grouillard, his race is run. The Ulmer engine is given up the ghost, and also falling backwards rapidly is Carl Wendlinger.
Yes, now Grouillard's probably going to do what we saw him do in Mexico, and that's drive a blown-up engine back to the pits. Now, he isn't paying for those engines, Ken Tyrrell is, and I don't think there was much left of the engine in Mexico, and when an engine blows up like that, you want to stop as quickly as possible. Whatever is salvageable, you want to use it again if possible, even just for a test engine. But by driving it back to the pit, you guarantee it's just fit for the biffa bin.
Well, that's one engine gone out of the Tyrrell stock then, and we had a glimpse of Carl Wendlinger, who's just to be put on another lap by race leader Nigel Mansell. And, well, I can't see anything go wrong for Nigel for his 24th career Grand Prix victory.
Well, Grouillard's made it back, and I suppose at least one of those cylinders will look like a ploughed field. But let's not be too congratulatory to Nigel Mansell at this stage. He's only on his 55th lap. There are 71 laps to go. I hate referring back to last year, but of course in Canada we saw Nigel on the last lap of the race all but one, waving to the crowds, and then little more than half a mile from the finish the car came to a stop. So the lesson he learned there is never to accept any plaudits until that checkered flag is out and you have passed it.
Well, Mika Hakkinen is now up to 8th place with the Lotus Ford. Of course, the other Lotus parked in the gravel by Johnny Herbert, being taken there with him by Jerry Boutsen, I should say, because Johnny, a very innocent victim in that little incident. But Mika Hakkinen, the Lotus, he said he was optimistic before the race, and he's doing his best in 8th position.
Yeah, both Lotuses really had a lot of handling problems, but it's sometimes strange. You fill the car full of fuel, and it's almost as quick as it is when you're empty. And that appears to be the case with the Lotuses here this weekend. When they filled the thing up with fuel, it was competitive. Whether that's just a factor of the tyres, or whether it's maybe giving the car more consistent aerodynamic properties, well, that's for the team to figure out. But of course, they're hoping this is going to be the last race for the somewhat vintage chassis that Lotus have been using. And they've got a new car, a new Chris Murphy design car, which we anticipate to see in Spain, a car that will also be down to the weight limit. And progress that Lotus have been making since 91. If you're a schoolmaster, you could put at the bottom of the test sheet promises or promising future.
Well, 56 laps completed. It's Nigel Mansell leading Riccardo Patrese by 14.7 seconds now. Then it's Michael Schumacher, 1 lap behind. Jean Alesi in 4th. 5th, Ivan Capelli. 6th, Michele Alboreto. 7th, Gianni Morbidelli. And 8th, Mika Häkkinen in front of Carl Wendlinger and Christian Fittipaldi, moving up to 10th place. And that new Lamborghini engine in the back of Fittipaldi's car and also in the back of Morbidelli's car. Well, it's not bad.
The engine is very good. I spoke to Daniele Ardetto. He's the man from Lamborghini, and they reckon the engine's producing something around 700 horsepower, which they're quite pleased with. And that's in the car, not just back in the test bed in Italy, where they tune the old test room to make it hyper-competitive there, but that is in the car. Well, there we got to stop. That's one of the... Well, we can't quite see who it is. Look like... Well, what does it look like? Well, there's Christian Fittipaldi out.
Christian out of his home Grand Prix. His pulse rate being under the 67 at the moment. I think that'll go down pretty rapidly. But very sadly to see Christian Fittipaldi. He qualified for his first Grand Prix. He said, or his father Wilson actually said, it's the hardest race of the year and it's the best race of the year. The hardest because everybody expects so much. And he says the best because we're back in Sao Paulo. But after 57 laps, Christian's race is run.
Well, he's going to have many opportunities in the future to shine here at Interlagos, a circuit where his uncle Emerson, who's racing today in Phoenix in the second of the kart races. Emerson won here. He won the inaugural Brazilian Grand Prix in 1973 in a Lotus 72, one of those black and gold Lotus 72s. But Christian undoubtedly will have his day here at Interlagos. But today he was running in 10th place. His race is finished, and his pulse rate undoubtedly dropping with his disappointment.
Well, coming into the pits is Carl Wendlinger, so probably his race will be run. That'll move JJ Leto up to 9th place in the standings at the moment, and also for him a very sad ending to a promising weekend.
Well, while all this is going on, there's an almighty battle for 5th place taking place between Ivan Capelli and Michele Alboreto. There's just under a second between 5th and 6th, and it's been like that for about the last 10 laps.
Well, we haven't seen any pictures. We do see that Nigel Mansell now is 16 seconds in front of Riccardo Patrese. And let's hope that's traffic and that there's not anything wrong with Riccardo's car. Riccardo losing even more time, 17.3, but 121.2 and 121.6. They're just taking it comparatively easy because earlier in the race, lap 34, Riccardo Patrese did a 119.4, and that's a new lap record.
Yes, it's just the luck of the draw with traffic. You catch a bunch of cars at the wrong part of the circuit at the wrong time, you can lose a couple of seconds a lap. And if Mansell's getting all the brakes in traffic, he doesn't have to lap any faster, he just relies upon those brakes. Patrese now 17 seconds. Well, that was the kind of gap we saw in Mexico. It was a bit more in South Africa, just reinforcing that Mansell is undoubtedly the man of 92. His approach to the season has been so positive. He's looked utterly confident every time you've seen him in the car. The only hiccup we've really seen was a brief excursion into the gravel in South Africa, and then that somewhat embarrassing situation between Ayrton Senna and Nigel Mansell in the closing moments of Saturday's qualifying. And really both drivers, I think, came away with egg on their face. In fact, they both chose not to discuss it at all. They felt that by discussing it would open more doors, more avenues to question. But here is the battle of the race right now. Michele Alboreto in 6th, chasing Ivan Capelli in 5th, and that is the gap you see just under a second.
Well, another man who's going slow at the moment is Mika Häkkinen. He did a lap of 1 minute and 40 seconds, and that is very slow. Though we see Häkkinen still in 8th place, but there's a car coming into the pits now. That's Gabriele Tarquini getting into the pits, but Mika Häkkinen, well, not a very happy man if you're doing 140s when the leaders are doing 120s. Then there is definitely something wrong. Ivan Capelli, his best showing to date so far in the Ferrari. And let's hope he gets on for a point finish. And also the footwork of Michele Alboreto. Alboreto, a Grand Prix veteran, we can say, for his second year with the footwork team. And, well, he's in the points.
Yes, the white flag we saw waved, that was for Mika Häkkinen, that slow car running in the high 30s, that was a 38, so I think he's probably lost about 4 or 5 gears. Both Capelli and of course Michele Alboreto getting through cleanly. Alboreto tossing off one of those rip-offs, those tear-offs. Now that's what got into the radiator of Martin Brundle's car in Mexico, but ultimately, in fact, the reason for Brundle's retirement in Mexico was a broken water pump. But when the car came in, they didn't see the water pump, they saw the radiator filled with one of those rip-offs drivers sometimes use 2 or 3 in a Grand Prix. They do get scattered around the track, and they can get into the radiator, the box the radiator's in. But Ivan Capelli fighting to retain his 5th place. There have been a number of rumours around the pits over the last couple of days regarding Capelli and Ferrari. Some say that Alain Prost may return to Ferrari. Others are saying that Nelson Piquet may be co-opted into the Ferrari team. Whatever the situation is, it is not clear, but undoubtedly Ivan Capelli wants a finish in the points. If he can finish 5th, he will be just behind his teammate John O'Leary, and that might help consolidate what could be a shaky position for Ivan Capelli.
Capelli, who started his Grand Prix career, of course, with the Leighton House team after he won the Formula 3000 championship for Leighton House. He's done 80 Grand Prix so far, and his best finish was a 2nd place in Portugal in 1988.
Well, Michele Alboreto is getting closer and closer to Ivan Capelli. You can see a driver when he feels him, he gets the scent, his head's coming forward. Michele Alboreto's head is now forward. He senses that he can actually do something with Ivan Capelli. Capelli really just consolidating as best he can. Michele, of course, in Formula One for almost 10 years now.
Well, since 1981 he made his debut in Imola for the Tyrrell team.
He had his first victory, I remember a victory in Las Vegas, the last Grand Prix of 1982. And now back with Michael Schumacher. Schumacher doing yet again a truly outstanding drive and looking to getting his 2nd podium finish in his career. Well, we saw him getting out of the car in Mexico fresh as a daisy. Another young driver, fit.
Well, and he's gaining on Riccardo Patrese at the moment, who's in the 122s. Well, there's not really a problem. There's 10 laps to go. So Michael Schumacher, who should really gain over 6-7 seconds a lap, and I don't think that's going to be possible unless Riccardo Patrese, of course, is having a problem. But well, that's got to be like a terminal problem.
Alan, I think you're just wishing and hoping. He's got no chance at all.
Well, Mansell leads, Patrese 2nd, Schumacher 3rd, Alesi 4th, and Ivan Capelli in 5th place in front of Michele Alboreto. We'll be back after the break.
Aos pilotos mais atrasados, talvez seja momento em que ele tem que se concentrar pouco mais, porque fazer uma corrida assim não é muito motivador.
E obriga a alguma concentração. Exatamente. E Adriano é de facto mais recorde a colecionar para a equipa Williams ter dobrado no Grande Prémio toda a gente. É de facto a confirmação da superioridade total por parte destes carros da equipa anglo-francesa, que domina em todas as frentes. E reparem na qualidade, no equilíbrio da câmara colocada a bordo. Não há ali vibrações especiais, não há movimentos anormais, tudo passa de um modo muito natural. Adriano, em relação a este homem, o Nigel Mansell, está de facto muito diferente do ano passado, não só no seu aspecto físico, que ele está mais magro, como também no próprio relacionamento com os jornalistas, com os representantes da comunicação social. O Nigel Mansell, enfim, por vezes fala mais com o coração, diz coisas, ou dizia coisas por vezes desagradáveis, e nomeadamente quando teve as inteligências com Ayrton Senna, que ontem e já hoje mesmo, depois do que se passou nos 4 minutos finais do treino de qualificação, não acusou o brasileiro de qualquer manobra tendente a tirá-lo para fora da pista. Até pelo contrário, disse que foi apenas um erro de ligação e de comunicação, que a expressão que ela ficou entre os dois, e que atingiu perfeitamente também a sua maior contraparte na saída de pista.
Welcome back live here at Interlagos, where we're watching the 3rd Grand Prix of the year, and you're watching the leader by 20.9 seconds, Nigel Mansell, I think, on his way to his third Grand Prix victory of the 1992 season. And of course a clear lead in the championship over teammate Riccardo Patrese, and then the Williams team having an even bigger lead in the Constructors' Championship.
Well, Nigel Mansell sitting back now, only a few laps of this race left. And of course the time in a race when every driver thinks he feels something, smells something, hears something. But of course the imagination, can run wild. But really it's only something very cruel that could deprive Williams and Mansell of another victory here in 1992. And we're just thinking really the principal opposition to Williams this year has automatically got to come from McLaren. And they've got now virtually a month between here and Spain in which to do something. But I don't know what they're going to do, because we've seen the new Honda engine. It isn't powerful enough. The new McLaren chassis, well, it's really designed to work around active suspension. They're testing their active suspension again this week at Silverstone. They're being pushed by Williams into introducing innovations which they're not familiar with. The gearbox appears to work pretty well. I suspect that was the reason for Senna's retirement in the race. But Senna really just trying to manhandle his car around, and really it was only his ability and his brilliance that kept it in third place for so long. So right now Williams with Mansell and Patrese seemingly unbeatable in this 92 championship.
Well, Alesi and Capelli in 4th and 5th behind Schumacher, this man Riccardo Patrese and Nigel Mansell, and it'll be the first points this year for the Ferrari team. They'll get 5 points so far if they both finish, and both drivers look like finishing. John, 1991 engines, they might not be the quickest, but they're more reliable than this year's engine.
The engine is more reliable, but I have to say, I think if that engine was in a better chassis, the Ferrari would be a lot more competitive than it is. The team is having to make a lot of compromises with the chassis. They're having to try to keep the car, maintain as constant an attitude to the ground as is possible, and of course that creates other compromises. But the revised 91 engine in the Ferrari appearing to be, well, let's say reliable, because it couldn't be any less reliable than what we had so far this year from Ferrari. But Ferrari has taken enormous knocks. The Italian press tore the team apart in Mexico. They're like a pack of hounds after a fox, and there wasn't very much left of Ferrari by the time the press finished with them on Saturday morning. But really Ferrari very important to Formula One, and they need at least some encouragement, and this kind of performance, undoubtedly they will get those rewards. But there's the man who's dominating the championship so far. That's the car, and his V10 Renault engine, pneumatic valves, and Delph of course providing the fuel.
Well, there we see the top 6. Mansell 23 seconds in front of teammate Riccardo Patrese, and all the rest 1 lap behind. And all the rest is Michael Schumacher, John Alesi, Ivan Capelli and Michele Alboreto. 7th is Gianni Morbidelli, and 8th is JJ Leto. And JJ Leto is using a 1991 Ferrari engine in a Scuderia Italia chassis.
Well, I think that's probably been part of the reason why Ferrari have actually gone back to those 91 engines. Nigel Mansell again just almost serenely on his way on the 67th lap. Mansell in contact with the pits. Very easy today. Once those pit stops, the tyres really, he had everything absolutely under control. And other than that little faux pas we saw on Saturday afternoon, and it really just illustrated how easy it is, how things can go wrong so dramatically. So when you are the quickest driver, when you've got the best car, when you're winning all the Grand Prix, you are still vulnerable, and silly little incidents like that in qualifying can just alter the whole perspective of the season.
There, Christian Fittipaldi doing interviews with Brazilian TV and other journalists, wanting to know how his first home Grand Prix was, and I think your first home Grand Prix is always a very special one, John.
Yes, Christian he tried to get back for a nice, quiet 10 days or so before the Grand Prix. As soon as he was back, sponsors wanted him, the media wanted him, and it's bewildering, particularly as a young man. He is only 21, He's got all the benefit of a father who was a Grand Prix driver, but nonetheless the responsibilities today of a Grand Prix driver is such that you do not have privacy. You cannot just run away and hide for those 10 days, and Christian, I think, will be really quite happy that this Grand Prix is over. He can now concentrate on being a Grand Prix driver and not being a media superstar. I mean, there's TV commercials with Christian running all over the weekend here in Sao Paulo.
We're looking at the leader of the race, and that's still Nigel Mansell. He hasn't led this race from start to finish, we must say. The lead being taken by Riccardo Patrese until the tyre stops, and they came on lap 25 and 29 for the Williams team, when Nigel Mansell decided to make a fairly late pit stop, but it all worked for him, and I can't see anything go wrong, although John will probably not agree with this. And the yellow flag we see has been there for a very long time, and I suspect it's Eric Comas who parked his car actually on the pit wall. We haven't seen that.
Yes, Comas' car was parked on the pit wall, and really nobody would want to go out and try and drag it in. It's the quickest part of the circuit up past the start-finish line, so there'll be a stationary yellow flag sitting probably in the cockpit of the car, but also at the station before the car there'll be a stationary flag just to warn drivers that that car is still there. And of course it then makes it difficult. No one is allowed to overtake in that area where the yellow flag is displayed, and that of course is one of the favourite overtaking parts of the circuit. You're not allowed to overtake until you can see a stationary green flag.
Mansell on his 69th lap out of 71, so nearly home. Well, and that's the relaxed atmosphere in the Williams team.
Yes, a few fairly happy-looking campers there now. They know there's no more pit stops scheduled. Of course, I mean, a puncture is always possible. You drive over some debris, bits of bodywork. Things do end up on racetrack. It's an oil flag, in fact, being held out. Someone's engine is pitched. I mean, you saw a car coming into the pits just the lap prior to this. Somebody's launched an engine. That oil flag out to warn the remaining drivers that there is liquid, probably oil and water on the track. But in this temperature, with the number of cars still running, of course, it would clean up fairly quickly, but it has to be held out until the officials, the marshals, are quite happy that the entire field is aware that that hazard now has disappeared.
Nigel Mansell, we saw him in South Africa taking the fastest lap, sort of very near the end of that Grand Prix in Mexico. It was Gerhard Berger who had fastest lap, and now it's Riccardo Patrese.
Well, Mansell running in the 1 minute 23 second bracket, Riccardo Patrese in the 1 minute 24 second bracket, and they're just going through the functions of the closing laps of this race. Now they're challenging Patrese, some 26 seconds behind Mansell. Two drivers who've done a very good job, a superb job all weekend. And all they want to do now is just get onto the podium, get their bottles of bubbly, give it a shake. Probably have Michael Schumacher once again shower them as he did in Mexico. And then we'll wait until the interviews after the presentations and hear from Nigel Mansell, Riccardo Patrese and Michael Schumacher how difficult, or in the case of the two Williams drivers, ultimately how easy this race was. Undoubtedly Nigel will tell us it was a hard race and really he had a few problems. But when you win by such a large margin, I have to say, your tongue must be well and truly planted in your cheek when you say that.
Nigel on his very last lap, his 71st lap of this Grand Prix. probably taking things very easy now, just wanting to get to that finish, and his 24th Grand Prix victory in 168 Grand Prix, and he left 30 points in the bag, 30 points, and that is 26 more than Ayrton Senna.
Well, and what a lovely way to go to Europe. But remember, we saw a situation, a parallel situation to this last year. It was Ayrton Senna was the man with all the points in the bag. An emotional victory here in Brazil for Senna. He achieved that victory under very difficult circumstances because he had lost gears, but he got a victory in Brazil, a victory he'd so dearly wished. And it was only in Monaco where Nigel Mansell got his first points of the championship. He finished second to Ayrton Senna. But then in the European season, things came alive. Mansell and the Williams team really began to win races. Senna and the Honda team had problems. They ran out of fuel in 2 races. And by the mid-European season, we had a real championship battle on our hands. And I hope that situation we see again this year. But McLaren and Honda are going to have to work very hard indeed, because it isn't going to be given to them on a plate.
Well, there's a checkered flag for Nigel Mansell. As in 1989, he wins the Brazilian Grand Prix. He won then, of course, on his debut for Ferrari in Rio de Janeiro. But win number 24 is there for Nigel Mansell. 30 points are in the bag for him towards this World Championship he wants so badly. Riccardo Patrese, we're waiting for him to come in. The third double in 3 races for the Williams team. There is Riccardo Patrese. He is second in the championship with 18 points. And Williams Renault has a staggering 48 points in the Constructors' Championship.
Great performance. But just looking back to Nigel's comments, which he made this morning after his accident yesterday, he slept fitfully. He feels a bit bruised. I bet you he doesn't feel fitful or bruised right now. But undoubtedly we will hear that he had a hard race. But there's a very, very happy man indeed. And a totally deserved victory. He has worked many, many years to achieve the level of dominance. Williams have done exactly the same thing. Mansell with his Union Jack and the Brazilian flag. Well, relieved, pleased. He'll go back to Florida, get his old golf clubs out, undoubtedly have a couple of rounds, then back over to Europe, and the Williams team will pick up where they've left off. Undoubtedly a lot of testing. Barcelona, the first of the European Grand Prix. They cannot afford to lay back on this cushion they've got, because people like Benetton, McLaren and Ferrari will respond. It's only natural. You've seen it happen in the past. But let the man enjoy his accolades. He deserves them. After yesterday's little incident, everybody had tremendous worries about Mansell. Was he injured? Could he take part? Was it his race car? Was his race car repairable? Well, the Williams team have done a magnificent job in repairing that car. There'll be a lot of people back in Didcot in the Williams factory. Undoubtedly they'll be popping their corks as Mansell does this parade lap. And everybody in the Williams team, from the people that come in the morning and sweep up all the shavings from the lathe, from the people that are making the parts of the car that sometimes don't seem to be so crucial, so vital, the entire team, they will savor that victory.
Dan Katayama, 9e plaats. En op een 10e plaats de Lotus van Häkkinen. De snelste ronde in de wedstrijd werd gedraaid door Riccardo Patrese. 1:19.4. 3-0. Wat dat betreft ook weer een teken dat Patrese er alles aan gedaan heeft, maar gewoon niet bij deze man kon komen. Nigel Mansell op weg nu naar de pits en naar het Parc Fermé. Daar wordt de Williams dan nog weer gekeurd door de technische mensen van FISA. We gaan natuurlijk de taferelen weer met u zien, het champagne spuiten. En waarschijnlijk, als het allemaal in het tijdschema past, de persconferentie. Handen los van het stuur nu, Nigel Mansell. 10 auto's zijn er slechts aan de finish gekomen en waren slijtageslag. 10 auto's aan de finish en dat betekent dus 26 uitvallers. Daar de Häkkinen op die 10e plaats. Mag toch ook tevreden zijn. Heeft in ieder geval de race uitgereden. En daar is Nigel Mansell. Hoogtijdagen voor de Britse autosport natuurlijk dit. En dan komt een cordon van marshals hier. Om iedereen weg te houden van die auto's. En dan natuurlijk meteen de luiken dicht. Stel je voor dat we nog wat kunnen veranderen aan de auto's. Geheimzinnigheid ten top daar. En dan deze stand bij de constructeurs, bij de rijders, sorry. Mansell 30 punten, 10 maal een puntje, dus 10 punten voor een overwinning. En 3 overwinning betekent 30 punten. Dan Capelli, de chaser is. En ook Alboreto schaart zich nu in de mannen die punten hebben gescoord in het wereldkampioenschap 92. Herbert en Hakkinen hadden die puntjes al. Cesaris en Capelli scoort er ook 2. De Cesaris stond al in dat lijstje. Gejuich van de tribunes. Maar men had natuurlijk liever een Braziliaan gezien op het podium in de vorm van Ayrton Senna. Hier de beloofde stand bij de constructeurs. Wat een enorme voorsprong en het is Benetton Ford wat McLaren van die tweede plaats verdringt. Benetton Ford dus als tweede renstaal nu. En ook hier dat ene puntje voor Footwork Mugen Honda. Heel belangrijk, dat puntje, dat enige puntje. Eigenlijk de beste prestatie dachten we zo die Footwork de laatste jaren geleverd heeft. Dit ene puntje. De fotografen staan daar op een podium wat bijna op instorten staat, als ik het zo zie. Daar natuurlijk de Italianen op. En de Italianen die waarschijnlijk toch goede berichten zullen gaan schrijven over de Capelli en Alesi. En dan zijn we in afwachting natuurlijk van de beelden vanaf het erepodium waar de bokalen zullen worden uitgereikt. In afwachting zijn we dan weer van die jonge Schumacher. Wat gaat hij nu weer doen met de champagne? Vorige keer gooide hij het heel brutaal over de oude rotte heen. Patrese moest het ontgelden en ook Nigel Mansell. En dat zijn altijd weer leuke plaatjes. De spanning is eraf wat betreft deze wedstrijd. Maar we zijn natuurlijk in Barcelona weer helemaal terug. Met nieuwe auto's, nieuwe kansen en natuurlijk nieuwe prijzen. En dat allemaal op 3 mei aanstaande. Natuurlijk gaan we dan ook weer bij Eurosport die trainingen voor u verslaan. De warm-up en de allesbeslissende training op zaterdag. Gejuich van de tribunes. Dat betekent dat we de winnaar moeten gaan zien. Nou, dat is duidelijk hier. Daar is hij, Nigel Mansell. In het gele pak wederom Michael Schumacher. Nigel Mansell aan de linkerkant Riccardo Patrese. En aan de rechterkant Michael Schumacher. God save the Queen, God save Nigel Mansell. Zo willen de Engelse racefans het natuurlijk graag zien. Applaus dus voor Nigel Mansell. In de 34e ronde dus de snelste tijd voor Patrese. 1:19.490. En daar is Schumacher, de bokaal in de hand. Kijk, die jonge Duitser daar toch eens blij mee zijn. Mag zo langzamerhand wel een grotere prijzenkast gaan aanschaffen. En daar is ook de bokaal voor Riccardo Patrese en dan nog een grotere bokaal. Het kan niet op hier in Brazilië voor Nigel Mansell. Gejuich. En natuurlijk het skanderen vanaf de tribunes. Mansell, Mansell, Mansell. En dan de 3 op die eerste plek. Misschien de plek waar ooit Schumacher echt komt. Bokalen worden aangedragen, overladen werkelijk met geschenken. Tranen zelfs bij de Williams medewerkers. Nou, en dan komt het weer, de bekende champagne douche. Wat zal de brutale Schumacher gaan doen? Wederom gooit hij het geestrijk vocht in de nek van Mansell.